in Waterford, took time to come up to be with us tonight. He had to rush up. His children and family are involved in many, many activities as well. And I think anyone who's into sport will certainly know who Derek is. Known as a real motivational man on the sideline, and in his own college in De La Salle, led him to 2 Harty Cups and 2 All-Ireland finals. And then he also played hurling himself, winning county championships. And then Waterford, he also trained to win the league title and lose narrowly to Galway in an All-Ireland final for his brief spell training the Waterford team. I'm sure he's not too happy with the umpire yesterday at the Waterford Clare match. But anyway, hopefully they'll win their next one and put out Limerick and go progress themselves. So anyway, Derek, thank you so much for coming to be with us, and I invite you to come forward now.
I just have a few notes in case I get lost, which is quite possible. Listen, I'm very honoured to be here. It's a hard act to follow. I think David Walsh was here last week, and David is a good friend of mine. David's brother is brother Thomas Walsh, who teaches down with us, who's actually my best man at my wedding. And Miss Gaskin, who's leading the choir, or leading the singing tonight, is a colleague of mine in De La Salle, and she, like me, I suppose, I have a young lad doing his leaving cert, and he is in the summer concert currently in De La Salle College. So there had to be a bit of negotiations done. I was dropping my youngest boy, Oren, to a hurling blitz, and I'm big enough anyway without Father John was going to offer me grub on the way up here today. So I said to myself, I'll try and manage, we'll say, to kind of just, I suppose, not wing it, I suppose, but just do the family stuff first before coming here. There's a slight bit of embarrassment in that, and I'm privileged at the same time in that I'm taken by the numbers. I think I've described myself before as a hypocritical Catholic in that I tend to pray when I want something. I tend to pray when someone in my family is sick, and I was listening to the petitions there, and you feel a little bit guilt-laden, I suppose, in terms of just your approach to church in general. You kind of maybe the vocational or altruistic element to teaching, sometimes you kind of lean on that as kind of a giver in class, if you like, or trying your best to help young lads in terms of the law of reciprocity, that you're able to kind of give back a bit. So the connection really, as I said, is through David, through Brother Tom, and through Mary. I also am friendly with Lawrence Phelan, or Lawrence Phelan, I think, as you call him up here. I'm not sure is that the pronunciation. I think Lawrence is a parishioner here as well. So listen, I won't keep you. As I said, I'm conscious even of sometimes you're guilt-laden when you're reading the words of the act of sorrow there, and you're kind of, the words have changed since the last time perhaps you were at Mass. So as I said, I don't want to be hypocritical about my whole approach, and I'm here to be as honest as possible, anecdotal and nice and light. So I'll just give you a bit of backstory, I suppose. I was born and raised in a place called Ballybeg in Waterford City. Ballybeg is probably the most urbanised working class area of Waterford, opposite the SETU there. I know Carlow are a part of that amalgamation now. Lovely childhood memories in Ballybeg, as I said, very, very working class area. We didn't have much like lots of people, I suppose, but yet we wanted for nothing in terms of love and unconditional love. Mother and father very devout. Late father passed away a couple of years ago, but my mother is extremely devout. She's probably online and listening to me now, so I better just be conscious of what I'm saying, because she, when I say sometimes that she's devout, she kind of says to me, that doesn't mean I'm a holy Joe now. I don't even know what a holy Joe means, but she'd look, we would set our clock by Mam over the years in terms of Mass. So Monday she would go to the Dominican, Tuesday she would go to the Friary, Wednesday she would go into the Holy Family, Thursday she's a Mass goer all her life, and she shows us up, I suppose, in terms of her example to us, in that when we were growing up within the house, you had to go to Mass. You had to come home. If you went to Mass even with a few of your buddies, you had to come home and you had to kind of recite, not recite in full, but you had to kind of say what Father Mullen or Father Cunningham had said at the local Mass. And that was probably the way. I'm 48 now in May, and I suppose I'm married 22 years now. So until I left the house, the rules in the house were you had to go to Mass and you had to kind of obey the rules of the house in all the doctrine of the Catholic Church. And I had no issue with that, because I think there's a great Robert Frost poem, Mending Wall, where it talks about the coming together of innovation and evolution and change with tradition. And for me, it's probably like the church, without me being pontificating about it, it's probably that fusion of old and new ideas that allows people probably to move forward in general. And I would have learned a huge amount from the traditions of my house in terms of the approach to even my own sons. And as I said, love was unconditional in my house. I left St. Saviour's National School in 1989. I had a full head of blonde hair and I was about 10 stone, so things can change, you know, things can change. And I see my youngest boy has a full head of white blonde hair now. He's a smashing looking young lad, and I say to myself, I hope you hold it for a bit longer than myself. But so I left for De La Salle College then, and in the area I was in, we had a local secondary school alongside of us, and I left in 1989 to go to De La Salle College as a student there, largely to do with the hurling. I suppose there's probably a college in Carlow or in Kilkenny, Kieran's, etc., that they have a kind of it's known as a nursery or an academy for sport, etc. So my dad kind of had it in his head that, you should go to De La Salle for the hurling, because it's kind of a merger, an amalgamation of all the South Kilkenny, the best lads from South Kilkenny and the best lads from Waterford City that would go to De La Salle. And look, it was a brilliant decision on my behalf, in that we still have existing brothers living in our school. I'm teaching there now subsequently in the school, but my 5 or 6 years, the brothers almost took me on as a kind of a project, if you like, because I was perceived to be from a more working class area of Waterford City, and De La Salle is probably associated with the more affluent area of Waterford. And the brothers just took me under their wing. They employed me during the summers. I worked there in 89, 90, 91, 92 and 93 painting the school. The brothers paid me. I won't tell a lie now, I actually never did an interview for my job as a teacher in De La Salle. When I was doing the HDIP, the brothers arranged the De La Salle school in St. Benildes in Stillorgan for me to do my HDIP. And whilst I was there doing my HDIP, the brothers rang me to tell me they had a job back for me in De La Salle. So I'm institutionalised, I suppose. I'm conscious of the Shawshank Redemption and someone talking about institutionalisation, whereby you're stuck to the one place. But I absolutely love it. I feel a real open, warmth atmosphere in the building, and I love teaching. I absolutely love teaching, and I love the fact that we still have 5 or 6 brothers living in our building, on the seafloor in our building, and still active brothers in terms of the teaching environment. In terms of the choir, Brother Ben, I have a 6th-year boy, my own 6th-year young man Fionn is in 6th year, and they put on a mini concert for Miss Gaskin and all the teachers today, just to say thanks in terms of the music and what they've done for them in terms of their human development over the years. So that was a real honour to be a part of that today. So I suppose I went from there, as I said, to UCC, back to De La Salle teaching. And if I was to kind of sum up the influence of the brothers in terms of my faith, I suppose, what I've learned, I suppose, I've learned the value of respect. I think I've learned the value of humility, hard work, honesty, integrity. I've learned the value of fun as well, in terms of I see them having great fun, having great times around the place. And my relationship with faith, I suppose, has been, my mum's brother there died last Thursday, right? He'd been sick for a while. And I was in the church, we'll say, on Saturday, obviously, for the funeral. And up to that, I'd say it'd been probably 6 months since I'd been in a church, So since we left the home, I suppose, since I got married, nothing to do with my good wife, by the way, just, I suppose, faith petered out for me. It petered out for me. It kind of, I went away from God. I didn't go away from in a private capacity, but I certainly went away from in a public capacity in terms of the rituals, the routine, the needed practice, I suppose, that you would probably espouse. The feeling I get from the room here in terms of that kind of ability to go all in. So, as I said, I've been kind of a hypocritical Catholic, so much so that another colleague of ours, a guy called Dermot Dooley, who's a brilliant religion teacher in our school and a brilliant guy, really devout. lover of God, and as I am myself, but Dermot would be a bit more to the forefront in terms of espousing it and putting it out there, I suppose. He said to me there, I suppose it's a month ago now, or even 6 weeks ago, we have kind of priests that come into our school to administer confession to the boys. And he said to me, Mac is my nickname. He said, Mac, why don't you go in and get confession? So I kind of said to him, sure, I will. I kind of just said, I'll take him up on the dare. It was almost like a dare. I said, I will. So I will. I'll step forward now. I'll go in and get confession. So I stepped into confession anyway, and a brilliant priest there. So he said to me, how long is it since your last confession? And I said, 22 years. And he said, are you serious? And I said, yeah, it's 22 years since my last confession. So he said, how long have you got? And I said, well, I have to be in class in 10 minutes. So he said to me, come back. So anyway, so I did come back the next day, and I went in there, and I was in there for about 45, 50 minutes, okay? And but this is the interesting thing in terms of just faith, and whilst I was in there, I had a battle between my subconscious and my conscious, in that I was almost prepared to kind of lie in there, go down the normal route of, I spoke ill of somebody, or I didn't do the right thing, or I was bad-mannered when, etc. But I said I'd go in, and whilst he was asking me, I said I'd go warts and all, I went really confessional in there. I didn't keep back, and I found there was a power by having someone in front of me that was kind of, I suppose, not imbuing it from me, almost being able to kind of extract the information from me in a very, not in a very rigid manner, in a very conciliatory tone. And I got something from that in terms of an epiphany moment. I know you're probably maybe not familiar with the musical Les Mis, but there's a great scene in Les Mis where the Valjean is on the run, and he steals some silver from the bishop, and the bishop kind of, what I call a second chance scenario, he kind of, when he's rearrested, it looks like Valjean is going to be put in jail, and he says, the bishop says, hang on, leave him go, he said, and he gives him the other silver, and he says, see in this some higher plan. So sometimes when we think of a higher plan or a higher purpose, sometimes that's intangible. It's like, I'll get on to the team ethics in a few minutes, but, a higher plan. And he also says you must use this precious silver to become an honest man. So it acted as an epiphany moment for me. And as I said, my father passed away 2 years ago after a brief illness. And he would have gone into the Edmund Rice Chapel in Mount Sion every day all his life. So we'd say for the last 15, 20 years, he would pop in every day, say the rosary, say a few prayers and just in kind of complete solitude inside in the Edmund Rice Chapel in Waterford City by the Mount Sion Secondary School. So I said, right, for Lent, I'm going to step up now, and I'm going to go into the Edmund Rice Chapel every day just for even 5 minutes. I'd find the time to get in there. And in your headspace, you're saying, I haven't time, I have to collect the lads, I have to be up in the field, I have to be here, I have to be there. And Fiona has a grind here, I have to go there. And I went there for the 40 days without missing a day. I went to the Edmund Rice. And so I've started to step forward, as I said, not in the public domain in terms of Mass every week. I'm not making an excuse about that. I didn't think to go to Mass, I suppose. And I think I'm probably just trying to follow the example that my father gave me without being... And there are times that I'm in Mount Sion, the church, and I'm saying to myself, why am I here? So it's a battle all the time, if you like. It's a battle, not a battle between the demons and God, but a battle to kind of say to myself, I'm getting something from this. And I think just the persistence and the perseverance that's needed is the most important thing. So I had a great relationship, as I said, with my parents. And my own relationship with God, as I said, it could be called a little bit hypocritical. At matches, for instance, before big matches when I was Waterford manager, I had an interesting habit. I'd go into the cathedral in Waterford. I'd go to the right to St. Anthony. I'd say a few prayers to St. Anthony on the right. Then I'd come up the church here. I'd come across to the Sacred Heart of Jesus was over on the left, the red candles. And I'd say the prayer, O Sacred Heart of Jesus, you said, ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find. And every time I prayed to him, I'd say, listen, I promise that I'm going to rightify myself. Now, I'm actually not a bad person in case you rightify myself. Just means I start going back, doing a little bit more, like in terms of Christian values, etc. And I'd put in €2, and then if I had another €2, I'd put in 4-year, and I'd be praying in advance of a big match. I could say, look, and I'd purposely not say, please help us win. I'd purposely say, look, just make it go well for us, or make it go well for us, so that I wouldn't be perceived as being too greedy, if you like. So, okay. So what I would do then is I would light the candles then in the formation of how we were going to play. So just to kind of, so if we were playing with two in the full forward line, I'd light 2 up top, and I'd light 1 at the back extra, and I'd kind of light it, and I'd feel that I'm going to get some sort of look because of that. And I know that's a bit silly to say, but I used to kind of skip out of the church, and I felt good about myself. Now, the problem was the follow-up with regards to the practice of your faith, etc. And I probably would have done that a good bit whilst I was in school, okay? So, in terms of the 5 years I was involved with Waterford, we were in 5 finals in 5 years. We lost 4 of the 5 finals. We lost 2 Munster finals, a National League final, an All-Ireland final, and we managed to come out with 1 cup. So when Sky Sports do the stats, you're not going to look too, you won't be to the forefront when it comes to the 20% win rate in finals. But one thing about my time at Waterford, and maybe a lesson for people that are here that are either grandparents, parents, teenagers, young boys and girls, is kind of, I suppose, the capacity to go all into something. And that applies to faith as well. Sometimes I see an all-in attitude here tonight. I see people singing. I see the lady here, a brilliant singer, going for it, and not being afraid of perception, or not being afraid of people commenting, or just really going all in. And sometimes in life, I've said to the boys in school, we're afraid to go all in. We're afraid to be immersive. So my tenure in Waterford, I look back on it very satisfactorily because I went all in. In actual fact, we coined a phrase as a team. We called it "Gach Rud, Gach Law," everything, every day. So when you're giving something everything, well, then you can look anybody in the eye, and that includes Jesus, I'd imagine, and that includes God. It includes if you're up and at something, regardless of results. So that's why I think some of the criticism around amateur players that give their everything to something is just a bit far-fetched in terms of the avenues now that people can explore through social media. So it's hard to go all in because you're vulnerable. And you're probably familiar with the work of Brené Brown that talks about vulnerability, and I suppose the 3 things that are associated with vulnerability. First of all, if you're going to be your authentic, creative self, the likelihood is you're going to meet a bit of ignorance along the way. If you're going to be possibly a little bit different, you're going to meet a little bit of ignorance. I think it was Owen Harris that founded the Rotary Club. He said, in the many battles between intelligence and ignorance, ignorance is normally the aggressor. So it's always there. It's always there. It's always going to be there, and I think young people need to realise that it's there, not to run away from it, but that it's going to be there. The other thing she said, I suppose, is that the very definition of vulnerability is putting yourself out there, coming off the blocks, showing up, and giving something everything. So again, an anecdotal story. My oldest boy was picked to sing "O Holy Night" in first year, right? So he came home and he's telling me, I got picked to sing "O Holy Night, but I'm not doing it. He said, why not? So, well, you're a teacher in the school, so they're going to say that you were picked because, I'm teaching in the school, etc., blah, blah, blah. So I said, I think you're wrong now. I think you need to step up. And I'm sure if I asked for a show of hands, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, I'm sure we've all stepped out of challenges before. We've all stepped away from things that we think the outcome mightn't be suitable to us. It's a hard thing to do. I think as in Mockingbird they say courage is knowing your lick before you begin, but seeing it through no matter what. It's a difficult thing to do. It's like the round robin game for Tipperary, and I mean that with the greatest respect next week, because I was in a situation in 18 where we played our last round robin game. We were out of the competition, but you have to show honour, you have to show integrity, you have to show perseverance, you have to show grit, passion plus perseverance for long-term goals to get through that particular process. So those things are very, very difficult to negotiate for any person. And it's the same with faith. There'll be ups and downs, there'll be ebbs and flows, and I think that's important to bear in mind. The other thing I'll say is to any young person here, or to any person here, middle-aged or elderly people, I suppose, people often say to me, what does it take, outside of honesty and integrity and dignity and grace and courage, what does it take to get the best out of yourself? What does it take to live a good life, I suppose. And I think it takes a kind of a combination of emotion and logic. So in any dressing room or in any classroom, you'll have boys that are really logical. They're data-driven. They like information. Okay? Then you'll have others that are emotive. And some people think that they don't exist on the same spectrum. They don't kind of coexist. They can't be in the same person. Or someone is emotionally adept, able to kind of look. Now, the thing about emotion is it mightn't be sustainable. Every week wanting something so much, really hoping for something, really going after something, having so much passion that it becomes overwhelming. Then you might really need to rely on logic. And when the logic runs out, you might have to go after something that you genuinely believe in. And I think that's important. There's a great book called Discipline Equals Freedom. And that's an oxymoron. The contradiction in discipline equals freedom. So structure, in terms of your daily routine, your life, your faith, your prayers, your rosary. My house, as I said, I know already every Friday is fish in our house. I know the routine of our house because that's the way we were reared. That's the way we were brought up. So we know what we'd have nearly every day, okay, in our house. And the discipline equals freedom. So if you want to be financially free, for instance, you're going to have to be financially disciplined. If you want more time, you're going to have good disciplined time management. I think that's important. It's a really good book, Discipline Equals Freedom. It's a manual. So I'm more encouraged about young people today than most people. I think they're very creative. I think they're innovative. Do they need guidance and support? I think they do. I'll take my house. My dad or mum never said to me in all their lives, "I love you, Derek." It just wouldn't be said, But when I was going to UCC and there was a credit union loan needed, it was there for me. It was, everything was done for you in kind of in an understated manner, if you like. And that was probably the times. My dad was born in 48. So that was probably the times then. Now I struggle to get the balance right, in school and in parenting, between support and challenge. So my youngest boy now is a bit of a tearaway, shall we say, right? Oren, if he's hope he's not listening to me now, right? But he can be a bit of a tearaway, and he's 10, but but when he could be after, say, we might get a phone call from St. Declan's, come over, Oren is after A or Oren is after B, right? So, and that night you'd be tucking him in, like we all have done. You'd be tucking in your children, and you might say to him, "Geez, Oren, I'm proud of you, I'm proud of you, and I love you. But any chance tomorrow now, when you're in kind of, in this class, that you might kind of roll back on your approach with A, B, or C." But I'm comparing that to being tucked in years ago, where the words weren't evident, and I'm conscious of mollycoddling my son, I suppose. Getting the balance right between being able to say to him, "That's not good enough. That's not good enough." And I think of my poor father. And obviously, I said to myself, I'm not going to swear from the altar. That's one thing I'm not going to do. But my father was, a few years ago, he was training the 8-year-olds in Delasad and the 6-year-olds, which is a fair penance now, Father. I can tell you that, Father John. It's a fair penance to train the 6-year-olds on Saturday mornings. And I'll finish up now. I'll be 2 or 3 minutes. And my father was training the 6-year-olds. And so they were doing the jab lift or the roll lift, which is, par for the course. And we still do it at senior level, I'm reminded say. So one young lad wasn't having it at all, And he was saying, "This is stupid, So this is stupid, So my father wouldn't be known for his patience now. That's all I'd say, right? God be merciful to him. And so he was kind of saying, "What am I going to do with this fella? Just keep going now," because I was helping out with the coach as well. And I was saying, "Just keep going, We did this last week. This is stupid." The young fella kept saying. And then he said, "I'm going to join Ballygunner," he said, the young lad. So my father said, "Fake off to Ballygunner then, for your sake." All right? So, you wouldn't get away with that anymore, is what I'm saying. And he said it in a bit more colourful tone than I've put it there now, is what I'll say. And the point being, I suppose, that people have different ways of, I suppose, conveying messages and conveying their point. And it takes kind of you combining Goldman's leadership style from affiliative to coercive to dictatorial, all those things in one, to be able to kind of mix your message towards a young person these days, which is not easy. Just there. I'll finish now by kind of saying, if I was to kind of sum up a number of principles that are associated with team ethics that are also associated with the church. I look at the big picture. What's the big picture? Like, when I left the Waterford job, right, the first 2 years watching Waterford were one of the most difficult experiences of my life, because you're envious of not being involved, if you like, right? It's very hard. It's very hard to explain. It's not jealousy. I don't know, is there a difference between jealousy and envy? I'm not so sure. I should know as an English teacher. But you're kind of, my mother says to me, it's human nature. Like, you want to be, and you don't want them to lose, but you feel you want to be part of it. And I'm sure you're all members of clubs, whether it's bridge club, whether it's chess club, whether it's choir. When someone else takes over and they're going well, you just feel a bit ostracized sometimes. So if you can get the big picture in your head, superseding all that is Waterford. Superseding all your own inadequacies or limitations or feelings is probably God in the church. And I'd imagine there's a kind of a parallel there. I think that's important to bear in mind the big picture. But that takes a while to get used to. This is my first year enjoying the matches, albeit yesterday just a little bit controversial, I suppose, and I was kind of saying to myself, I didn't miss that element of it, okay? The other one is negotiating change, making sure you're able to negotiate change, making sure you're authentic, and making sure you have recurring systems in place. You have routine and process involved. And the final one is, can we identify people that I call cultural architects? A cultural architect is someone that has the ability to change someone else's mind. So there's a great quote by Mark Twain where he said, if you find yourself on the side of the majority all the time, pause, reflect, ask yourself why. When I was leaving De La Salle, Brother Stephen wrote a reference for me, and he said that I was intellectually curious. And when I went home, my mother said, that means you're paranoid. Okay. So she said to me, you're always asking, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Okay, so I'm sure you have a son or a daughter or a sister that kind of might ask you every now and again, what do you mean by that? Okay, and curiosity but there is a thing called positive paranoia where you're sharp enough to see what might be coming. In terms of the future, I did a small bit of homework, and I was kind of reading one of the prayers. I was saying to myself, call her to your assistance, for such is the divine will that she should help in any kind of necessity. So that was the Lady of Perpetual. I was saying to myself, that gives me some sort of way in there, any type of necessity. And my ills, or my way, I suppose, is to kind of look for, I think she's associated with the Christian views of redemption. So just to be kind of finding a way back to the church, I suppose, is my next step. Finding a way back to the church and bringing the kind of the goodness with me, I suppose, in terms of my son in 4th class was doing a comprehension there a couple of weeks ago on Rosa Parks. And he said, in it was, when you make up your mind about something, this diminishes fear. And I think that's a good concluding note, basically, to be able to go for something, see it through, go all in, as I said, in terms of singing, in terms of praying, in terms of learning, I suppose. And I'm looking at that awful picture. I mean, there on the. So, on the 21st of December 2020, Dr. Paula Calvert, who's the oncologist in Whitfield Clinic, rang our house to say that my father had a week to live, right? So you get a kind of a phone call like that, right? And I'm talking about praying now, and you kind of, I'm probably, being very not derogatory, but degrading in terms of my own relationship with God. It's probably better than I'm espousing here. So I kind of say to myself, when I get that phone call, I have an older sister, Nicola, she's 5 years older than me, and I kind of had to step forward almost and kind of go in and tell Mum. We were kind of we were holding the true details, not the true details, but we were trying to give Dad some hope and everyone in the house some hope. So you try and manage and manipulate the situation to suit yourself. So you pray for guidance, you pray to find the strength. I pray now. There's days that I don't think about my dad, and I wonder, I feel guilty about not thinking about him. And there's days that I feel a little bit of bitterness towards how I feel about it when I watched Waterford over the first 2 years. And I pray, I say to God, don't have me think like this way. Okay, so I think the point I'm making, and I'll finish on it, is whilst I'm looking at extremely devout people here, I'd say it's never enough, really. You know, you got to go an extra mile all the time. You got to live your life to the full all the time, and maybe the grace will come to you. I think as Hemingway said that, courage was grace under pressure. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. You can say how you're such a motivational speaker. I just said, I'd love to be in a fly on the wall at some of the dressing rooms at half time when you're